Hi, I'm Cynthia Hunt, the library's program director here at the Amarillo Public Library, and today we are going to be making knitted bunnies. These are awesome little things to make as an Easter gift or as a baby shower gift or a baby gift, and you can say you made it all yourself, but it is so crazy easy because all you're going to be doing is knitting squares of fabric and then sewing them together with a yarn needle. So let's get started. Okay, now knitted bunnies can be done using any size yarn and any size needle, but for the sake of making it quick and easy, I'm using a worsted weight number 4 yarn, which is a medium weight yarn. So I have, this one is called Café Latte, and this one is called Warm Brown. But I'm going to be using the Café Latte today. You'll also need some straight knitting needles. Usually I like to use round needles just because you don't have to lift things up and down, but these aren't going to be that big. And there's a really specific reason why you want to use a straight needle for these, which I'll get into during the demonstration. Okay? You'll also need some polyfill, and it just says polyfill. You get a big old bag of it, and you can stuff any number of bunnies with one little bag and have plenty left over for other projects, which I will get down to later on in our series of videos. You'll also need a yarn needle. You'll also need some scissors because you will occasionally need to cut thread. And that's it. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do, if you haven't knitted before, is you're going to need to get about a yard of yarn measured off and tie a slip knot. Now a slip knot, you just make a loop, then bring one end under the loop and pull it through. And that makes a slip knot. It's called a slip knot because if you don't have something like a knitting needle in it, first it slips along there, but you can also just completely slip it off of your yarn so it slips away. So what you're going to do is put one of your straight needles through that loop, and that's your first stitch. You're already started. Then we're going to knit. We're going to cast on in a long tail cast on, simply because that's my favorite cast on. We'll probably do another one some other way for some other project, but I like the long tail cast on. It's fun, it's quick, and it separates the yarn stitches on your needle really well. So you're going to need to cast on, including this one, 28 stitches for a small bunny, or if you want to do one of these larger bunnies, it's going to be 42 stitches. Now, if you're using a smaller stitch, your bunny may come down a little, maybe a little smaller. Same if you're using a narrower kind of yarn. If you're using a 3 instead of a 4 or a 2 instead of a 4, you're going to wind up with a itty bitty bunny. But you're going to do a long tail cast on of 28 stitches. Now, the way you do this is why you have this much yarn on your long tail. You put it towards your left and the skein yarn, part of the yarn, on your right. And what you're going to do is grip with your 2 last fingers both of those pieces of yarn. Then you're going to put your index finger and your thumb in the space between these two, and then bring the needle towards you so that it makes this shape. You're going to go stick your needle up your thumb under the yarn, then stroke it down your index finger on hooking that part of the yarn, then move it through that first loop that's on your thumb, and then let go with your thumb, and that's a second stitch. So we'll go up again, down the index finger, and back through that loop that's on the thumb, and let go with the thumb again. That's 3 stitches. So up the thumb, stroke down the index finger and across and through that loop on the thumb, let go of the loop on the thumb and tighten it. Now you've got 4. So I'm going to go on ahead. 5, 26, 27, and 28. Now you've got 28 stitches, and that doesn't look like a lot. It'll spread out a little bit as you actually start knitting. Now, if you don't know the knit stitch, here is how you do the knit stitch. This entire bunny is done in garter stitch, which means you knit all the way down one side, then you turn your work and you knit all the way down to get back to where you started. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to put on my glasses so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. And this, you put in your needle in the loop that's closest to the tip in the same direction as the needle that's already in there. It's kind of like stepping into pants. You do not put one foot in from the ankle end. You put them both in from the top. So it's the same way. And then you cross it a little bit so you can swing your yarn around the back of it in a counterclockwise motion, and you're going to go between the 2 needles, and it'll make a little sound. There's 1. Stick it back through, bring it around. Stick it through, work it around. And what I usually do is kind of bring the needle in my right hand down to where just the tip is touching the barrel of the other needle, so that you don't lose that piece of yarn. And just bring it around and between and scoop it through. Get the needle in, bring it around and between. Move the needle through to hook on that little piece of yarn that you just threw. Around, between, and through. And just keep doing that all the way to the end. When you're at the end, I'll show you how to turn your work. And then I'll show you how to cast off, because you need to know how to wind up with a completed piece of knitted fabric. Now, first, we're going to get all the way to the end of these stitches. All 28 of them are all done just the same. After a while, you can actually be looking at things while you're knitting, because it's all the same stitch on this particular project. There are other projects where you pretty much have to count every stitch and figure out which way you were going, and it can be a little bit hard to deal with. But for today, we are going with a really easy project. You say, yeah, easy for you maybe, but by the time you're done with this, you will have developed the muscle memory that will let you do this, and you'll pick up your speed as you go. So all of the stitches are now on the needle on the right. What we're going to do is just move it to your left hand, move the needle that was in your left hand to your right hand, and I tend to put my hand closer to me than that yarn is that I'm going to be dealing with first, simply because when you knit, your yarn is supposed to be away from the piece of work, because otherwise you will add on a stitch accidentally every time you do this. So here we go again. Put the needle back into the first loop, swing it around in between, pull it through and off. Around, between, pull it through and off. Now that first row is knitted, the second row is going to be completely knitted. And when you are doing knitting one way and knitting the other way, it's called garter stitch. And that is what we are going to be, the fabric that we are going to be creating for these bunnies is 100% garter stitch. Now, that's about as much as you need to know about knitting. I'm going to show you now why you're using straight needles for this. Here I have, these are double pointed needles, but they're still straight. Whenever you have quite a bit of fabric on your needle, you want to make a square. So what you do is you take the bottom right corner and move it up and across. When it is even with the left edge, you make a right triangle. So this is the angle. And when it's even, it's a square and you can bind off. So what I'm going to do now is bind off. And the way you do that is you stick it in just like you normally do, and you knit the first 2 stitches. And 2. Now what you're going to do is hook the stitch that's farthest away from the tip and bring it over that second stitch and over the tip.
Towards me a little bit.
Okay. And bring it over the tip of the needle. So here you go. You knit another stitch. And then you bring it over. And then another stitch. And you bring it over. And another stitch. And bring it over. And this is how you cast off or bind off your stitches. We're just going to take each one and loop it over the one before it. And that's how you get all of these stitches off so that you have a finished piece of fabric. Now once you get to the very last one, I'll show you how to keep it all from undoing, because if you don't do something at the very end, it's going to keep on unraveling. You have that specter of all that work undone by not locking off that last stitch. So here we are with the last 2 stitches. I'm going to pull this one over, and you're stuck with one active loop. Now if I were to take this needle out and pull this yarn, this whole thing would unravel. So what I'm going to do is make this a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to snip off the yarn, and then I'm going to put it through that last stitch, and that acts as a stop on it, so it can only get so small it can't get past that piece of yarn I just stuck through it. And that's how you keep it from unraveling. It won't unravel now. Now to finish off this square of fabric that I've just created, I'm going to put this yarn needle on, and I'm going to go down the edge, not the top, not the bottom, but this edge here. You can see that I'm going through the same part of these stitches, each one, just to tuck in that end of the yarn. I'm going to pull it through. And on a smaller project, I like to go all the way through the side. And that way it's hidden, it's not going to show any ugly unfinished edges, and it's in there. And it's not going to come unraveled because there's no way this can come unraveled. Now I'm going to do the tail from the beginning of it the same way. So we've bound off, we've learned how to cast on, bind off, and do the knit stitch and garter stitch. I'm going to go on ahead and clean this up while I've got it, and I've got the needle handy. And then I'm going to show you how to sew up the body of the bunny. So now you have a square of fabric. And normally what I would do is use the same color yarn to sew this bunny, but because I'm doing a demo, I'm going to use a contrasting color of thread. I'm going to go with this yellow, and this is a color called Cornmeal, which I really like. And I'm going to get about a yard, the tip of your fingers to the tip of your nose with your outstretched arm is about a yard, at least it is for me. And I am going to put it through a yarn needle and thread the needle. And then what you're going to do is fold your fabric with the lines going across, not up and down. And you're going to find that halfway part. And then you can sew along that row every inch or so using your yarn needle. All the way across. And then you're not done. What you're going to do next, I'm going to pull that through a little bit, is you're going to use the same piece of yarn on the same thing, and you're going to sew up to the middle of the top half, just like it was going up to a point. So mark where you're going to go, and about every inch or so, again, you sew it up all the way to the top. Then, get a little bit more yarn here. You're going to do the same thing going back to your starting point. So you're right back where you started, and you have this little triangle that you've made. And what you're going to do now is take both of these yarn ends, and you are going to pull. I'm going to mostly pull on the one that has the needle on it because I want to be able to use this yarn for something else. And you're going to pull it, and this makes the head and the ears of your bunny. It's that quick. We've done it in probably under a minute. So what you're going to do, don't pull it all the way closed, because you're going to need to get a little bit of polyfill and stuff your bunny's head. And you want it to be fairly full. You want to put enough in there that it will stretch it out and make a nice round little noggin for your bunny, because you don't want it to be all ears and no face. And you want it to be full enough that even when you wind up closing it all the way, that when you wash it and dry it, it will still look full. So then you pull the rest of it closed. ahead, since I'm doing a contrasting color, and you can't even see where it was. It just pulls right in. Okay. And since I'm doing this in a contrasting color, I'm going to go ahead and knot these two pieces so I can pull them apart later on. So I can do this in regular yarn and have a finished bunny. Now you can tell that the back of the head is still a little bit open. That's okay. What we're going to do is we are going to sew a little whip stitch over the top of both sides of the edges. Make sure you don't strangle your bunny. There you go. Here's the second one. Pull it through. And then you're going to pull that top edge where your top stitch was between the two ears and go on either side of those where the two edges of the cloth meet. And that will close up. Do it again and go on the other side of the edges. And look, Ma, no holes. And you're saying, yeah, but my bunny's ears are the wrong way out. We'll be fixing that later. But you can see that you've now got a little face and little bunny ears. But for the meantime, what you're going to do is make the body, still on this same piece of yarn. And what I'm going to do, you can see where I did that whip stitch. I'm going to go line up these ridges so that they're kind of lined up together. And I'm going to go in on one side and then out on that same side. This is what is called an invisible stitch. Then you're going to go directly across where that one came out and go in on the other side and across. It's about 1/4 inch maybe. And then come out on the opposite side. Now when you are doing this in regular, more tightly woven fabric, what this is going to do is make an invisible seam, because the only part that goes across are these round stitches. But when you pull them, they completely disappear, even though you have contrasting thread. So they will just about completely disappear. And if you're using the same color, you won't be able to tell where these stitches were. So you go on ahead, go directly across, down 1/4 inch to have your end come out. Go directly across, down about 1/4 inch, come out on that side. And you're going to keep doing this all the way to the corner. Then you're going to turn the corner. And yes, those bunny ears are going to catch on this yarn. I haven't worked out a way to avoid that, so you just have to be mindful. But you can see that even though I'm using a contrasting color of yarn, that is almost invisible because the edges turn under where you have those stitches that bridge the two sides. And because it's completely inside on the underside on both of the edges, you can't tell where it was. So you just keep going. It's like the Energizer Bunny. You just keep going and going and going. Then, when you finally get to the end, you have this nice little seam for your bunny back. And that will be its little backbone. Then what you're going to do is you'll come out a 1/4 inch down on the side and then go across and down just the same way you've been doing, but the yarn will go across the back. So this goes out. Down a 1/4 inch, out. Straight across, and down a 1/4 inch on the side. That's where it comes out. You can see where this is starting to disappear already. And you get about halfway down, and probably about 2/3 of the way down on the bigger bunny size, but we're doing a little bunny. And then you stuff the bunny body, which is kind of fun to say. So get some more polyfill, and the body is going to be substantially bigger in size than the bunny's head, which one would expect. And go ahead, stuff it all in there until it's about as full as you think seems suitable. And it's quite a bit bigger, as you can see. And then you just pick up where you left off, and you're going to sew about a 1/4 inch on the opposite side, and you finish up your seam all the way down to this tip. And you can see, even though I'm using a contrasting thread, you can see very little of this yellow yarn on any of this seam. About the only place you see it is up here. Now, this is the strange thing, because right now you've got a very strangely shaped bunny. What you're going to do is take this little point and you're going to sew it up to the neck of your bunny to give it that rounded back and little haunches that you need to have for a proper bunny. So what I do is find about just either side of the middle of the bunny's neckline and put my needle through there and then pull it, and then hook it through both ways there at the very point, and then I'm going to pull. Boom. Gee, that wasn't hard at all. And I'll go through it a second time just to make sure it stays put. And again, this is in the little neckline of your bunny, so it'll be hidden by its little neck. And now you have your bunny head and body, and it has a nice little rounded back, and it's got nice little fat haunches. And now we're going to play with its ears. The great thing about sewing through this sort of stuff is that you can go on ahead and go right through the parts to the area where you want to work on next with your needle. So I'm able to insert it at the base of the throat and come out in the middle of one of the ears, and then pull. And this will also help secure that little corner up at the little chin of your bunny. Now, to make you can do your ears just about any way you want to do. I like to have them be a little bit, You want them to be straight, but they can be either going straight forward, they can be turned out a little bit, they can be lop-eared if you want to make them lop-eared bunnies, because some people are big into lop-eared bunnies. Me, I kind of like the traditional, I've got straight up ears. Kind of like it's curious and listening to a story that you're reading to it. So it can turn out a little bit, but it doesn't have to. And what I do is do a couple of little whip stitches from the base of one ear through the base of the other ear. And you can do another one a little bit higher up. And another one a little higher up. Depends on how skinny you want your ears. If you want your ears fairly round, you can leave it right about here. If you want it fairly skinny, you can go sewing them up a little bit more if you want. I'm kind of happy with it this way. So then I'm going to put my needle in to the middle of that and go over to the bottom, to the base, about midway through of the other ear. And turn it around. The hard thing is making the ears match. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't do it completely. These are pretty close though, I think. So I come out and I pinch them together and I go around the outer edge and go across through the outer edge of the other base of the ear. And do it a second time. And if you want, you can make them go up a little more, or you can just leave them back a little bit. But either way, they look cute. And there's still just a little bit here of where that hole that was made when we were stuffing the bunny is. So I'm going to go on ahead and close that up with a couple of little stitches. And I'm done. So now all I have to do is get rid of this yarn end. And what I'm going to do is there are 4 strands in this particular yarn. Different yarns have different numbers of strands, but I'm going to divide them 2 and 2. And I'm going to get the needle and put it on my yarn needle and go under one piece of yarn from the body of the bunny, just like that, and pull it out, and that way it's separated from this other piece by one piece of yarn. I have two strands here, and I'm going to tie a square knot. Tie it and tie the other one. So they're all the way up at the baseline of the neck of that bunny. Then I'm going to rejoin these 2 pieces of yarn, not as neatly as they were before, because I'm not going to go spinning them all together. And I still have enough left over that I can go on ahead and I can push this through the body of the bunny so that it comes out someplace on the bunny's body. Doesn't really matter where. And I can pull it just a little bit taut and snip. And now you have a bunny. And you can stop here. I mean, this makes a great little present for a baby. But if you want to do something a little extra, you can add a tail and legs. So, for a small bunny, I made 2 more little squares for its back feet. Now, what I did with this was whenever I first made these bunnies, there were 2 that I made. And every time I showed them to somebody, they'd go, oh, they'd try and stand it up, and the bunny would do a face plant. Didn't matter what size bunny, it would follow because it didn't have anything holding it up. So I decided, well, I'll invent back legs for them. So that's what I did. And what you do is you make, for the smaller size bunny, this is the one with the 28 stitches, you do a 7-stitch square. So you cast on 7 stitches and you keep making rows until it comes out to a good right triangle and bind it off. Leave yourself plenty of room on these for yarn, because you're going to use this yarn to attach, to sew your leg closed and attach it to your bunny. So first you take one end, and I'm going to tell you right now, you do not want, at first I was thinking this through when I was coming up with these, and I was like, well, we could go around this way where the yarn has these little stripes going up and down, and I decided no, I really would rather have it go the way the rest of the bunny's body looks and have the stripes go across the leg. So what I did was, you get your needle and you move it through, just back and forth, all the way from the opposite end where the yarn is already from knitting. You'll start there and work your way back to it. And then you pull it through, and then you pull it through some more, and it makes the end, it closes the end of the leg. Then you're going to line up your stitches, your little rows of this crossways rowing, and you're going to sew back and forth close to the edge of the fabric. And these are really small. If you wanted to, you could make 2. If you wanted to actually have a little jacket or something that you put on it, like Peter Rabbit, you could. I kind of drew the line at that. I'm not big on anthropomorphizing animals, but if you wanted to, you could. And this goes all the way to the end. And what you can do at this point is you can tie a square knot, but I want to wait until I've stuffed it. So you say, oh, well, this is a cute little leg. But what I'm going to do is get my big straight needle that has the nice big head and push it through there from the tip that we sewed closed, and then pull it so that it turns it wrong side out. And that way, all of that stitching that you did, the seam is allowance and stuff is now on the inside of the little leg. And then you're going to stuff it. And this takes a little doing. But it does have some give because I haven't tightened the yarn at the end. So it makes it a little easier to stuff this. And you want the stuffing all the way down at the bottom, and you don't want it to be all the way up to the open end, because you're going to want to sew that closed because it fits on the underside of the bunny. So just the tip of the foot will stick out. So get a little bit more until it feels just comfortable to you. And then you'll do a second foot, because a one big-footed bunny doesn't stand up much better than a no big-footed big bunny does. And then you're going to get another one of these and do the same thing. I want to look about the same size and shape, so you won't have a big foot on a little bunny and a small foot on a little bunny, because it'll look kind of lopsided. So then you get your needle, pull it through, and you are going to use your first string just to sew back and forth to close that edge of the little pocket that comprises this foot. Then I'm going to move in about a 1/2 inch. I'm going to sew back and forth to get up about a 1/2 inch closer to the tip of the bunny foot, about this far, and then I'm going to sew across that. This gives me a nice flat surface to use to attach this bunny foot to the main portion of the bunny. Okay, then I'm going to stand the bunny up and put both feet under it and see how evenly it stands. Do I want them to go farther in? Do I want them to kind of splay out? I kind of like them to just kind of peek out, but make a kind of a V shape. And I kind of have so that their feet are just a little bit apart. Now this is the one that I sewed. So now that I know where it is, I'm going to hold the bottom of that bunny foot in place, and then I'm going to, my needle came off its thread came off my needle, so I'm going to re-thread it. Oh, forget it, I'm going to go ahead and just drop my bunny, have it a little farther on the needle, get that threaded, so I'll be able to put this on. And what I found usually is there's a little pleat that goes down from that corner that you sewed up to the neck, and I like it to be just about halfway, right in line, the halfway of the foot to be in line with that pleat at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and I turn it out just a little bit because I don't want it to look like too stiff. So that's where I'm going to put it. I'll take one foot, so I'll get the other foot. Okay. So you can see how that bunny foot is about halfway centered. It's pretty much centered on the bottom edge of that pleat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jab into, it doesn't sound good, but I'm going to jab into through that foot, and then I'm going to kind of sew it onto the bunny body and come out on the bunny body, then go back through and come back up. Go back through, and each time I'm getting a little bit of stitch of that bunny body and a little bit of a stitch of that bunny foot. And once I've gotten it where I want it, then I'm just going to keep working around the edge of the foot underneath the bunny to get it firmly basted on there. And you can actually just do a whip stitch on this part. This way, you have a nice little foot that is going to be very firmly attached, so that if you have a baby, if you're giving this as a baby gift, they won't be able to just pull it off. It won't be a choking hazard. It'll just be a solidly attached little foot. And that's one of the things that I have worked on really hard on this project, is to make sure that none of this is going to come loose. And as you get towards the front again, you'll want to start going back up and down instead of around. So now you have a little bunny foot. And I could probably do the same thing with this other one. But what I'm gonna do is, just like I did before, is I'm going to divide this yarn into 2 pieces again and put 2 on the needle. Oh, come on. Get on there. It tends to crinkle up a lot more when you've separated it. Okay. And then I'm going to, just like I did earlier on the neck when I was finishing up that piece of yarn, I'm going to go through 1 piece of the fabric, so it's like 1 stitch away. Take it off the needle, then tie a square knot. Make sure that that yarn isn't going anywhere, and then thread it back on the needle. There we go. All 4 little strands, and then I can move it through anywhere else in the body of the bunny that I want to, and then give a little bit of a tug so that it'll pop back into the bunny's body. And there you are halfway done with your feet. Now we're going to do the other foot. And we have a bunny. Now, for the tail. For the tail for this, I did a 10 stitch square. So it's 28 stitches for the small bunny for its head and body. 7 stitches for each of the feet, 2 7 stitch squares, which takes no time, and then a 10 stitch square in white, or whatever color you want, for the actual tail. Now, with this square, how do I make a little round globe for the tail out of a square? Well, you may ask. What I'm going to do is start about a 1/4 inch in, and I am going to sew in about 1/4 inch increments, just like I did on the body of the bunny, and I'm going to rock the needle back and forth into a circle. If you've ever done any quilting, this is the same thing that you do with a bunch of squares of cloth. That you can do them with squares, which is what I'm doing. Usually it's circles, but for a yo-yo quilt. And what I did was go in about a 1/4 inch, and I'm just doing in and out and in and out, and I am rocking it back and forth, and it comes out at about the same place as I started. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but with a yo-yo quilt, what you do is you have a circle within a circle. You stitch inside the edge of the circle, and then you pull it, and you turn the edges of the fabric under, and it makes this little gathered pom-pom, this little circle. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to turn the corners into the center of the circle so that I come out with a already filled tail for my bunny. So I just pull it nice and tight, and I can tie these 2 together if I want to, and I think I will. I'll go ahead and close that part off. And this isn't completely perfect, but I'm going to do some little stitching that'll make it closer to just right. So I'm going to tie a nice little knot here between those 2 pieces, the beginning and end pieces, so that it stays put. Right about there is a little bit above the point where we turned the corner and went down and got the other corner and put up towards the neck. So I'm going to put that through and go a little bit, about a stitch on either side. And that puts the bunny kind of dead center, his little tail. So I'm going to go on ahead and do kind of a looping stitch going through part of the tail and part of the bunny, but staying close to the very base of the tail so that the whole thing is attached, but it is also not showing a lot of white running into this brown, or in this case yellow into the brown, which would not be good backside of the bunny. And just a little whip stitching it around. And when I have it as securely as I want, right now that's pretty secure, but I'm going to go on ahead and get it just a little bit more firmly on it at the top. Head, and do another double knot with these two. And thread them both through the yarn. Ooh, got one through, gotta get the other one through. There we go. And I can go on ahead and put that through. Pull the ends. That one already came through. I just have one that still needs to come through the rest of the way. There we go. And cut it, and there we have a completed little bunny. That's how easy it is. It takes longer to tell you how to do it than it does to do it. Not a whole lot longer, but a little bit. And there you have a little bunny you can give as a gift. Again, any place where you see the yellow on this one is where you would not normally see the stitching, because it would be the same yarn color as what you were using for the body of your bunny or for the base of your tail. So now you've made a new friend, a little bunny friend. You can make these in probably under an hour once you've done the actual knitting. Probably 2 or 3 hours at most for a small bunny, and maybe 4 hours total time for a bigger bunny. But go on ahead, hop on it, and get started on making your bunnies. And you'll have a lot of fun with these. These are so cute. I have yet to meet anybody who doesn't love these. I'll be back with more craft projects at another time. In the meantime, get on your bunny. On your mark, get set, hop.